Week 9 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few kickers I would start this week. The first kicker, Cami Fairbairn of the Houston Texans. Fairbairn on one of the best offenses in the league. I know Stephon Diggs is out as well, most likely now with the knee injury this week. But Fairbairn, 4 games in a row with double-digit fantasy points. Week 5 versus Buffalo, 16. Week 6 in New England, 12. Week 7 at the Packers, 12. Week 8 versus Indianapolis, 11. Now Week 9, a good matchup at the New York Jets. I give up the 4th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. So Fairbairn, he has a good boot. He could kick it from anywhere on the field. I know at MetLife Stadium, especially night games, the wind does howl a lot, but he's been an accurate kicker. And like I said, he's been a clutch kicker as well with a nice 59-yard game-winning field goal in Week 5 versus the Buffalo Bills. So Fairbairn on an offense that's going to stall out versus a pretty solid defense, and the Jets give up a lot of field goals this season. He's definitely a kicker I would start this week. Next kicker, Jake Bates of the Detroit Lions. Bates over the last few weeks starting to get things going and becoming one of the better kickers for fantasy football and one of the most, if not the most, high-powered offense in all of the NFL. So the last 2 out of 3 weeks, double-digit fantasy points for Jake Bates. Another good matchup coming up at the Green Bay Packers, where they're bend but don't break type of defense. And it could be a possible shootout between these two NFC North rivals this week. So the last couple games, Week 6 at Dallas, 19. Week 7 at the Minnesota Vikings, 8. And Week 8 versus Tennessee, 12 fantasy points. So like I said, this week a good matchup at the Green Bay Packers, a potential shootout between these two teams. And when you're on an offense where they're getting into the red zone a whole lot this season, you're definitely going to get fantasy points and opportunities. Next kickers, Younghoe Koo of the Atlanta Falcons. I know the last 2 weeks have been a struggle for Koo, but now back home versus the Dallas Cowboys in Week 9, where their defense can't stop anyone, giving up the 6th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. So the last few weeks for Koo, Week 6 at Carolina, 12. Week 7 versus Seattle, 2. And Week 8 at Tampa Bay, 7 fantasy points. So Koo last week, he missed a 50-yarder in that one at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he would have had a big game, no doubt about it. But this week back home, indoors versus a Cowboy defense that can't stop anyone. And we know Younghoe Koo, his home-away splits over the last few seasons. He's definitely a better kicker at home. And we've seen it this season as well, where he had some big games in Week 4 with 20 fantasy points, and Week 5 with 17 fantasy points, including a game-winning field goal. So Younghoe Koo back home with a good matchup, a kicker I will put in the lineup. Next start, Jake Elliott of the Philadelphia Eagles. So this Eagle team getting healthy over the last few weeks, and all of a sudden they're 5-2 on the season is Philadelphia. So Jake Elliott's got a good boot. He can kick that football from long distance on a high-powered offense, where Philadelphia now, in the last few weeks, they've really put up some points, obviously, scoring 65 points in the last 2 games. Week 6 versus Cleveland, 10 fantasy points. Week 7 at the Giants, 4. And Week 8 at the Bengals, 15. So this week, a good matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, that their defense can't stop anyone. We saw Brandon McManus have a good ball game for the Packers versus Jacksonville defense last week. And Jake Elliott's been a solid kicker for many seasons. I know early part of the season he didn't do much, but now with the offense healthy and getting more red zone opportunities and chances to score, Jake Elliott the last 2 out of 3 weeks has been doing good for fantasy owners. And the final kick I would start is Chase McLaughlin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This week, a pretty decent matchup at the Kansas City Chiefs, a defense that bends but don't break. And we know offensively, this offense at Tampa Bay is taking a big hit over the last couple weeks with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans out of the lineup for this Tampa Bay Buc team. But still, they're going to have to get in position in Kansas City if they want to pull off the huge upset. The Chiefs 7-0 on the season. They might have to try 50, 55-yard field goals in this one if they're trying to score almost every drive is this Tampa Bay Buc team. So we know Kansas City offense is banged up and they're not where they want to be, but their defense, one of the best units in the league, and this Tampa Bay Buc team has to find a way to exploit them. So Chase McLaughlin is a long-distance kicker and someone who's been solid for the most part this season. I think can help fantasy owners and this Tampa Bay Buc team put points on the board in this one. So McLaughlin this season, 4 out of 8 games, double digits, and the last 2 out of 3 games, 8 or more fantasy points for Chase McLaughlin. So that's a few kickers I would start for Week 9 of the fantasy football season.